What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the show. As always, thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys had a great weekend. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving holiday break. I certainly did. Everything went smooth. No ups, no downs, just nice and even, man. That's what I like. Nothing too crazy. Pretty quiet, actually. And that's how we like it here. So I hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving weekend. And man, is it good to be back talking to you again. There has certainly been a lot of stuff that has happened in the last few days since everybody has been on Thanksgiving break. And one of those is Derek Chauvin was stabbed in prison. That's right. A lot of people didn't know about this. This happened on Friday, and this is actually a pretty big deal. I'm pissed off about the Derek Chauvin trial because I think it's such a miscarriage of justice I think I've ever seen in my lifetime. That was a trial that was conducted and dictated by a mob, not the justice system. It was dictated by an emotional, hysterical mob that wanted to get a conviction of Derek Chauvin no matter what. And their pressure tactics worked. That is what I find to be the biggest miscarriage of justice. And it's bad enough that we possibly have an innocent man sitting in prison for the rest of his life. But it's bad for the country. It's bad for our justice system. It took a sledgehammer to our justice system, that trial did. And all it did was validate their tactics, their pressure campaign. And they used it on a lot of other things. They're using it for the SCOTUS courts now, where you had a guy try to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh's family. And do any of them get arrested? No. In fact, I think they're still protesting there, which is obviously illegal. We have a administration that has a justice system that it is clear and obvious. Let's just say this. It's clear and obvious we have a two-tier justice system in this country. And it's perfectly okay for the mob to dictate what a conviction is, who's going to be guilty, and they do it by pressure campaigns. They work in collusion with the media. The media works in collusion with the government, and they get the results that they want. They get their desired outcome. We talked about this a couple weeks ago about the Derek Chauvin trial, but that was before he was stabbed. I'm finding the Derek Chauvin trial to be popping up in a lot of different things. Everything has came back into the spotlight since new evidence has come out, since this documentary came out by, I think, Nikki Ruggs, I think her name is. I'm sorry if I messed up your name, but she released a documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, I think it's called. And it was all new body cam footage that was released from the officers on that day that George Floyd died. And it's got some pretty shocking revelations. I'm sorry, folks, but when George Floyd is sitting there and standing saying he can't breathe, it's just, there was a lot of stuff that has happened. And this is not on accident. All of this is a coincidence. None of this is a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. Surely, when you have government-involved prosecutors and high-profile cases like this, there are no coincidences, folks. All this is being run and implemented by the globalists. We have a group of people, not a small group, but a fairly large group, but they are powerful. People like Larry Fink, BlackRock, Vanguard, Bill Gates, George Soros, you know the names. These people are tired of being masters of their own universe, and so they want to be CEOs of the entire world. These people in collusion with the WHO, and they're trying to figure out how they can control everything. And for the most part, they have. There's one thing they don't have control over, and that is us and the free will of the American people. They do not have control over the people's agency. And that is the one thing they're desperately trying to get. And the way they're going to get it is the divide and conquer tactic. Some people call this the color revolution. And I think the George Floyd and the Derek Chauvin case was just a step into their direction, was just a stepping stone for getting what these globalists want. And that's exactly what Darren Beatty says right here. I got an article here from the Revolver News, and it says Chauvin's prison stabbing rekindles color revolution theory, and it's more powerful than ever. It's a very interesting article, but a very long one. I'm going to try and piece this up so we can get it all done within 30 minutes. So you're going to have to forgive me if I'm reading too fast or I'm skipping around, but I think it's very important that people read this. So you've probably heard that Derek Chauvin, the man charged with murdering George Floyd, murdering is in quotation marks, murdering George Floyd, despite the medical examiner repeatedly stating that it wasn't a murder, was stabbed in prison. His injuries were critical, and for a time, it was uncertain if he would even survive. Thankfully, he has pulled through, and doctors now believe he will recover. However, this attack has sparked numerous questions about Chauvin, the nature of his trial, and his treatment while incarcerated. So here is a statement from lawyer Eric Matheny, and he had this to say about the Derek Chauvin stabbing. The U.S. Bureau of Prisons has an obligation to ensure the safety and dignity of all incarcerated people. Why Derek Chauvin was in a situation where an inmate was able to stab him merits investigation and prosecution of corrections officials if needed. Why was he not in protective custody? How was another inmate able to get close enough to the high-profile and foreseeably targeted Chauvin with a stabbing weapon? Where were the COs? Good question. You know, this does spark this sparks a pretty big question mark. Why would anybody want to stab Derek Chauvin? Now, you could say, well, because he's a police officer that's now in prison. Well, there's a lot of cops that go to prison, and you kind of don't hear too many of them being stabbed to death, or stabbed in general. Why? Because they separate them from the public. What was Derek Chauvin doing in this type of situation to begin with? And then you have to ask the question, well, why would anybody want him dead? Folks, if you read the details about the Derek Chauvin trial, and most of you probably have, my listeners are very smart. You guys are on top of your game. You guys teach me a lot of stuff. Derek Chauvin's trial was a giant miscarriage of justice. There was so much pressure on these people, and we know that for a fact now because of deposition that has come out from a previous sexual misconduct lawsuit that was filed against the Attorney General. In that deposition, all these prosecutors and the head people in charge of this case were telling us, said in that deposition under oath, that they were under massive pressure to get a conviction of Derek Chauvin. So much so that they did exactly that. So much so that a medical examiner was coerced by a former D.C. medical examiner. Yes, somebody from D.C. The FBI was involved in this case, believe it or not. This case goes deep, ladies and gentlemen, deep, and it's getting deeper. But I want to explain what I think this is all about. This is just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. This attack prompted many to reevaluate the entire Chauvin-Floyd narrative. Revolver also took a deep dive into Derek Chauvin's trial, the new evidence that has been discovered, and the jury. The Anglo-American common law was supposed to save Derek Chauvin. That it failed says a lot about the America we actually live in now. It's been 2.5 years since the former Minneapolis police officer was convicted of murder for the death of drug addict and lifelong criminal George Floyd. Chauvin is barely 1/10 into his 22-year prison sentence, which he is serving concurrently with a 20-year federal sentence for depriving Floyd of his civil rights. So you're talking about 43.5 years he's going to be sending in prison, essentially the rest of his life. The Chauvin verdict was an obvious sick joke from the moment it happened. But even on the American right, the full realization of this fact seems to have taken until the last few weeks. This is true. A lot of people on the right kind of just let this die out. I don't know what was happening at the time this verdict came in, but there should have been outrage from way more Congress people, from way more lawyers and judges across this country, but there wasn't. Everybody can see exactly why Derek Chauvin was convicted, and that was not because of justice, but because of the mob and its massive pressure campaign. The mob and the media. The media controls the mob. And that's exactly why Derek Chauvin is sitting in prison right now for the rest of his life. Not justice. I want to go ahead and get that out of the way. So leading the charge was Fox host turned ex-Titan Tucker Carlson, who highlighted little-noticed recent developments in the Chauvin aftermath. Yes, episode 32 of Tucker Carlson's new show on X, he did a pretty deep dive into the George Floyd trial and what a absolute sham it was. And essentially, the facts and the evidence lead to that George Floyd died of a drug overdose. And then not only that, but since then, you've had a pathologist from Kansas come out and said that George Floyd could have died from a tumor that released a fatal amount of adrenaline in his body. Because when you watch the newly released body cam footage of George Floyd, it is pretty revealing, and it makes you wonder why they waited to the very last minute to release this. What these people are doing to our justice system and how they're using and weaponizing the media to misrepresent facts and evidence to propagandize people is astounding, and it's very effective, if you couldn't tell. So the Revolver story didn't stop there. It went deep into the terminal decay of one of our last lines of defense, juries. So the fact that Chauvin is now spending decades behind bars shows the terminal decay of one of the few institutions seriously protecting Americans from the overreach of an authoritarian state, the jury system. The flaws in this criminal case against Chauvin and the real facts about his death are the sort of things that a competent jury should have deduced. The state of Minnesota might have brought a parade of experts to testify that asphyxiation killed George Floyd, but a competent jury would have seen through this and gone straight to the medical examiner's initial autopsy, which plainly states the opposite. A competent jury would have seen through the swarm of ass-covering bullshit from the Minneapolis police, who muddled the issue by claiming that Chauvin's knee restraint on Floyd wasn't a part of department policy when Chauvin's defense attorney had a literal photo proving otherwise. This was their defense. They said that Derek Chauvin was not doing the restraint tactic properly, which caused George Floyd's death. This is bullshit. George Floyd, the initial autopsy report that came out the very next day, the initial one, the very first one that was done by Dr. I think his name is Andrew Baker. He came out in that preliminary report. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to try and paraphrase this, summarize it, and get through it, because it's important that you know it. In that initial report, he released that he did not find any indication of asphyxia or strangulation on George Floyd. That was until a former D.C. medical examiner put the pressure on him. This guy was a black activist who is now an interim deputy mayor for D.C. Yes, he got a promotion right after he coerced this medical examiner, Andrew Baker, into putting neck compression in his final report. So get that. This guy gets involved, this former D.C. medical examiner gets involved, makes some phone calls to Andrew Baker, and coerces him to putting neck compression in his final report. So you might be asking, well, how did he coerce him? Well, he coerced him by calling him a second time and saying that I have an op-ed that I'm going to send to the Washington Post, critical of your findings. Are you sure you don't want to change anything on that final report? Essentially threatening to destroy his life through the media. That's what he did. That, to me, is coercion, ladies and gentlemen. And that's exactly what this guy, Dr. Roger Mitchell, did. Coerced Andrew Baker into changing and adding neck compressions to his final report. And with a swipe of a pen, they were able to send this guy, Derek Chauvin, off to prison for the rest of his life. That was coercion. And so you might say, well, why didn't they just get Andrew Baker on the stand and say, I was pressured by this guy, Roger Mitchell? Well, they did. And Andrew Baker got on the stand and said, I wasn't coerced. Why would he say that? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because he is afraid of the mob coming in, maybe doing something like what they tried doing to Brett Kavanaugh and coming in through a window and trying to assassinate him and his family, just like they tried doing to Brett Kavanaugh. That's why. You're talking about massive pressure campaigns that are being conducted by this mob. This mob is being controlled by the media, and the media is being controlled by the politicians. I wouldn't say being controlled because they work one and the same. They're the same entity. So that's why this guy got on the stage and he lied to everybody's face and said, I wasn't coerced, even though we can look at the evidence, we can look at the facts, and that he changed his final report only after talking to this Dr. Roger Mitchell, who is a black activist, former D.C. medical examiner, who threatened him with a nasty hit piece to the Washington Post. All right? That's exactly what happened. So that to me is coercion. And it's just a shame that Derek Chauvin has to go spend the rest of his life in prison because the jury wasn't competent enough to figure this out. And so a competent jury would have realized that if Floyd was able to talk with Chauvin's knee on his neck and it took him more than 4 minutes to lose consciousness, then it followed that Chauvin's knee was not choking or strangling him and some other force caused his death. Yes, when you watch the footage of George Floyd, the body cam, the guy is talking. Like, how are you talking but yet being strangled at the same time? It just doesn't make sense. And that is exactly why on his first report, the medical examiner said that he didn't find any indication of George Floyd dying from asphyxia or strangulation. That is until Dr. Roger Mitchell was involved and coerced him into changing his final report and adding neck compression. So then it followed that Chauvin's knee was not choking or strangling him and some other force caused his death. but they did not. Instead, post-trial interviews with Chauvin jurors reveal that the jurors not only misunderstood basic facts, but the facts barely mattered to them at all. Instead, jurors engaged in emotional babble about how they felt Chauvin didn't care enough about Floyd. This is what happens when you have the media is influencing juries. They're poisoning future jury pools. This is what they do. This is how they mount these pressure campaigns. They use the mob to coerce the judges and sometimes the jury, most definitely the prosecutors. We've seen that in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. We've seen that in Brett Kavanaugh with the release of Roe v. Wade. We see that all the time. The BLM Antifa Democrat mob conduct pressure campaigns while simultaneously the media poisons future jury pools by just running emotional clips over and over and over again on loop and just saying, oh, look how George Floyd's just begging. Look how George Floyd just wants to be free. He's claustrophobic. He doesn't want to be locked up inside the truck. But when you watch the footage for yourself, and they know nobody's going to watch the George Floyd footage, they know this, and they're counting on it. They count on the ignorance of the American people. This is why conservatives and Republicans are right about everything, because we can think critically for ourselves. The left cannot. They are the Borg. They are told what to think and how to think. They act out on emotions, not reason or rationale. That's what we do. So we go back and we watch the footage and we say, hey, wait, how can George Floyd be strangled by a knee on his neck when he's sitting there talking? It doesn't make sense. Not only that, but George Floyd was saying he couldn't breathe before he was even handcuffed by Derek Chauvin. A lot of stuff didn't make sense, but it didn't matter to the jury. This is why we have a huge jury problem in this country, because these juries are being poisoned by the media, and that's exactly what they're trying to do to Donald Trump. They're trying to gag Donald Trump so that he can't defend himself, while simultaneously the media goes out there and issues leaks from the DOJ, and they start all these they get people emotionally hysterical. That's what they do. They want people to act out on emotions by saying, oh, he stole nuclear secrets and sold them to North Korea. This is what they do. And while simultaneously gagging Donald Trump so that he cannot defend himself, because if he does, he goes to jail. It is the most destructive and most disgusting thing that can happen to our justice system, is where you have a justice system that is dictated by a mob. It is essentially mobocracy. You don't have a justice system when you have justice being dictated by the mob, period. So this article goes on. Additionally, there's another colorful aspect to the George Floyd case. Consider the recent riots in France, where violent minority groups and left-wing Antifa supporters erupted over the killing of a migrant teenager by a police officer. This unrest mirrored the exact same pattern that unfolded during the George Floyd color revolution in the U.S. And yes, many believe it was indeed a color revolution, plotted and carried out by a shadowy force within the United States. As a matter of fact, here's what Jack Posobiec said 1 year ago about this very topic. Check this out.
I think it's been enough time. I think people need to just hear this plainly. And we covered the trial of Derek Chauvin day in, day out. I covered every single minute of it. And I'm just going to come out here and say something as plain as I can. Derek Chauvin did not murder George Floyd. Derek Chauvin, the police officer, did not murder George Floyd. We as a country need to have a system of criminal justice. We do. But we can't have a system of political justice, of woke justice. It was woke justice that put Derek Chauvin behind bars. It was woke justice that got O.J. Simpson out of prison when he killed his ex-wife, nearly chopped her head off, and killed a waiter. This country stands at a precipice right now. Are we going to allow the forces of political correctness, political opinion, public opinion, mob rule, and mob justice to determine the course of our country? Or are we going to live in an ordered society where we can look at facts, we can look at reason, we can use rational argument to determine the outcome of events? We can't redefine murder because we want a police officer to go to jail and because we want hashtag justice for George Floyd. The regime launched a color revolution, a domestic color revolution in 2020 in this country because they wanted to enact domestic change in our country. And they used and exploited the shocking and tragic death of Mr. Floyd as a means to their ends. Derek Chauvin didn't receive a fair trial, because here's how a trial like that would go. Was this hold permitted under the Minneapolis Police Code? Well, yes, it was. In fact, there are training slides. I pulled them up within a day of the video coming out. Shows you exactly how to do that. Number two, what did the autopsy say? The autopsy said there were no evidence of life-threatening injuries, and the autopsy said there was a lethal dose of fentanyl and other drugs in Mr. Floyd's system.
So there you go. He's right. This is woke justice. This is mob rule. That's what this is. And every single time you have justice being carried out by an emotional, hysterical mob, it never ends good. And in fact, it has led to probably countless. You couldn't even calculate how many innocent people have died because of mob justice. It is the worst possible thing that can happen to a justice system. Did we ever talk about the Salem witch trials? What we're seeing right now with this woke justice, this mob rule, is so similar to what happened during the Salem witch trials, and how 16 innocent people were executed because of a hysterical mob, right? That thought all these people were witches, and countless others locked up. And it only stopped when a rational person just, I don't know what happened. They looked in the mirror and said, what are we doing? We are executing people based off of emotions. So the Salem witch trials is as close to a historical reference I can think of that compares to this mob justice, this mob rule that we have in our justice system today, in our country, is where you have emotional, irrational, hysterical people that are trying to get street justice is what it is, but they're doing it in different ways. They're using tactics, and most notably, they're using the media to poison jury pools. Juries, okay, a jury of our peers is our last defense as free people. These people have the job of determining whether you are free or you will lose your liberties and lose your freedom and spend the rest of your life in prison, or worse, even being executed. It's just a matter of time before that starts happening. When you have this mob, when you have this type of mob rule, it will lead to innocent people dying, period. Right now, you possibly have Derek Chauvin, an innocent man, going to die in prison because of this mob rule. And all of this is being conducted by the globalists. I said this in the beginning. The globalists are behind all of this. This is their divide and conquer tactic. So the Revolver did a whole series on the color revolution. This is what Darren Beattie calls it, the color revolution. So Revolver did a whole series on the color revolution phenomenon. So first, a quick note on color revolutions. A color revolution in this context refers to a specific type of coordinated attack that the United States government has been known to deploy against foreign regimes, particularly in Eastern Europe deemed to be authoritarian and hostile to American interests. Rather than using a direct military intervention to effect regime change in Iraq, color revolutions attack a foreign regime by contesting its electoral legitimacy, organizing mass protests and acts of civil disobedience, and leveraging the media contacts to ensure favorable coverage to their agenda in the Western press. Boom, right there. It would be disturbing enough to note a coordinated effort to use these exact same strategies and tactics domestically to undermine and overthrow President Trump. The ominous nature of what we see unfolding before us only truly hits home when one realizes that the people who specialize in these color revolution regime change operations overseas are literally the very same people attempting to overthrow Trump by using the very same playbook.
Yes! Yes! Oh, yeah! Can you not feel that, buddy? Huh? 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 I have exorcised the demons.
So many view Derek Chauvin as merely a pawn in a much larger scheme created to divide and conquer the American people, keeping us entrenched in constant social conflict and war. Now, as more truths surface and questions arise about the actual events involving the regime's official narrative, Mr. Chauvin narrowly escapes a fatal stabbing in prison. It's no wonder people are watching these developments with suspicion, wondering if certain shadowy characters might be trying to tie up loose ends to maintain the momentum of their color revolution. Well, I would certainly say there is a lot of people that have motive to see Derek Chauvin dead, to tie up these loose ends. More notably, this guy, Dr. Roger Mitchell, this D.C. former medical examiner that came down and coerced Andrew Baker into changing his final report, the final autopsy report, and adding 2 words, neck compression. That's it. So this guy added 2 words, and mind you, this was recommended by Dr. Roger Mitchell. And all this was discovered in this deposition. Tucker Carlson did a show about it, but I don't think a lot of people caught on. This guy, Dr. Roger Mitchell, got involved, and some say the FBI was involved directly right from the gate.
Here now, Liz Collins. She's an award-winning investigative reporter and producer of The Fall of Minneapolis, which is just breaking today. So, how badly were the American people lied to?
Gosh, it's hard to condense this, Jesse, in a short segment, to be honest. And that was really why we wanted to put out this documentary, to give people a look at the lies really from the start. And we're still all paying the consequences of them. This is the very first time the police body camera footage was withheld from the public by Minneapolis police. That was for a reason. So we start the film right there with, here's what you were not allowed to see. That was only leaked about 2.5 months later. You have George Floyd complaining that he can't breathe before Derek Chauvin even arrives on scene. You have a black officer who arrested George Floyd that day, and Alex King, and we speak to him quite a bit in the film. Remember, this is supposed to be the most racist police interaction in American history, but nobody talks about the black officer. You also have on film the officers who are calling for an ambulance 36 seconds after George Floyd himself asked to be laid on the ground that day. And people should be upset. They should wonder, why was this kept from them for so long? I myself was working in mainstream media at the time, and I knew there was a lot more to this story, and was really disgusted about what the press knew, what they were privy to, and they were refusing to pass along to properly inform the public about what went on.
Liz, tell us a little bit about that 2019 George Floyd arrest that we didn't know.
So, again, we're told the very next day after what transpired in 2020 that the Minneapolis Police Department had never heard of George Floyd. They'd never had any interaction with him at all. But he had been the subject of an undercover drug investigation that went on for months by Minneapolis police. And you see the arrest take place of George Floyd in 2019, and he is saying almost exactly the same things he's saying in 2020. If you play the body camera footage from both incidents side by side, which we do a bit in the film, you can see that this is clearly someone who's experienced with police interactions. We go into his background. Again, that was held from the public as well.
So you spoke to the medical expert who said it was odd to see the FBI meeting with the medical examiner for a local crime. We reached out to the FBI for comment. We haven't heard back. Well, let's listen to this quickly.
The original autopsy was done 12 hours after he was declared dead. The official report that came out a little bit later, I'm told, was changed.
What do you think of the federal government's involvement in this case?
One of the first questions I asked was the FBI involved? And when I found out the FBI involvement was within 12 to 24 hours, that really raised a red flag for me.
So is that usual for the FBI to get involved like that for a local crime?
You know, I'll be honest here. My husband was a longtime Minneapolis police officer. He was the president of the police union at the time, and he talks about this. I put out a book. It's called "They're Lying: The Media, the Left, and the Death of George Floyd." The movie is based on that book that came out last year. But he talks about that in his 30-plus years in Minneapolis police serving. That's never happened before. And everybody involved in the film talks about how they've never seen a case that went to the FBI this quickly. That call was made, we know, by the Minneapolis police chief within hours of this incident. And I do believe that, you know, this is why much of this evidence was kept from the public, because there was so much involvement from people that had never been involved before.
Was the autopsy report changed?
So we, in the book and also in the film, we kind of just put it out there for people that we have an autopsy done within 12 hours of George Floyd, so passing away. Keep in mind, this is long before any buildings are burning in Minneapolis, but you do see a narrative change a bit over the course of several days, and we go into that quite a bit. You have meetings over and over again with prosecutors, and you also have some public documentation that just came to light about the immense pressure that prosecutors felt to charge, especially these three other officers. That they, in fact, in court documents now say they were not comfortable charging these three other officers who are serving time in prison with sentences that range from 3 to 5 years. We know, of course, Derek Chauvin is behind bars for more than 20. So a lot of this stuff is coming to light now, but people really should question why. And all that medical documentation, it's all public documentation. Reporters could have been reporting about it for a very long time.
So there you go. So there is plenty of motive here to see Derek Chauvin dead in prison. I think they're trying to Epstein Derek Chauvin, because there's no reason why this guy should not be in a prison where he's not going to get stabbed. Could it be a coincidence? Of course. But ladies and gentlemen, is anything a coincidence anymore? No. They accuse us on the right. They accuse us conservatives of being conspiracy theorists. And what may start out as a theory ends up being just a conspiracy 6 months to a year later. The reason why these people do not want to see Derek Chauvin alive is because if this man gets a retrial in a completely different environment, why would you try him in Minneapolis, where all these emotionally raged people are going to be the jury of your peers? That's not right. This judge, there was all kinds of mistakes made in this. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. All I'm saying is when you have cities burning down, I think that's a pretty decent amount of pressure to sit here and say, okay, we're going to delay this until the police get this under control, because we can't risk having an innocent man go to prison because people are afraid of the mob. And so they should have delayed the trial. Derek Chauvin just last Monday filed another appeal on his case, saying that there's a lot of evidence and facts that the jury didn't see. And just like this article said, I don't think the jury at that moment wanted to see it. They need a new set of jurors in there with a clear mind that are not emotionally attached to this video that they've seen, that are going to look at the facts, look at the evidence, and not make a decision on emotions. This is the problem with the entire left. The entire left act on emotions. This is why we're all suffering in pain and agony right now with the Biden administration. These people were so emotionally distraught by the media about Donald Trump. They believed all the media's lies, all the fear-mongering that Joe and Mika did and Rachel Madcow did, and they bought into it. And because they bought into it, they made a decision off emotions rather than reason and rationale. And that is when you make the wrong decisions. And one of those decisions was to allow this trial to take place with a jury that was completely fueled off emotions, that was scared of the mob, with a prosecution's office, the state, and the judge under a pressure campaign by the media, more notably a medical examiner that was being coerced by a D.C. medical examiner that was threatening to send a hit piece to the Washington Post if he didn't give the results they wanted. All this stuff needs to be brought to light. And it is. It's just taking time. The American people need to be more involved into the Derek Chauvin trial than they are. I think they don't want to get involved because in the beginning, we kind of all watched the video and was like, yeah, man, that kind of sucks. This cop, he probably should have let George Floyd up. He should have did this. Yeah, there was a lot of things that could have been done. There was a lot of things that were done wrong. But to sit there and say that Derek Chauvin murdered somebody, and is going to be spending the rest of his life in prison, that is not right. We have to have the ability to step away and get a 30,000-foot view on things. We have to make rational, reasonable decisions. And sitting there saying that Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd, when you see all these facts and evidence, is just wrong. And to see Derek Chauvin possibly being murdered in prison, to see Derek Chauvin get stabbed and had to get life-saving measures in a hospital in order to stay alive, this should be concerning to everybody, because what happened in the Derek Chauvin George Floyd trial was the biggest miscarriage of justice that this country has seen in a long, long time. And you could possibly have an innocent man sitting in prison right now. And I don't know about you, but that is to me one of the worst possible things that can happen to anybody. What's the old saying? It's better for 1,000 guilty people to go free than one innocent man loses liberty, to lose his freedom. That's exactly what I think we have here. These globalists, people like Bill Gates, George Soros, Larry Fink, BlackRock, Vanguard, go down the list. They want regime change in this country. They are tired of being masters of their own universe, and now they want to be CEOs of the entire world. You have the World Health Organization involved, you have the UN involved. It is a globalist takeover of our country. And the only way that they can defeat the people, the only way that they can steal the people's agency and free will, is by divide and conquer. And that is why they're keeping this country in a constant state of war. They're keeping the people constantly divided. And I'm seeing very, very incredible signs of unity. I do see it. The problem is that the forces we are up against may just have way too much power now. If we were going to start this type of unity that we're watching happen all across the country, not because of any ideology, but because of the pain and struggling everybody's feeling. So there's two things that I believe create unity: misery and prosperity. Those two things bring unity. Right now, people are being unified against one common enemy, and that is the people that are destroying this country and making people's lives miserable. Those people are the Biden administration. Those people are the Uniparty, the Democrats and Republicans. That they say they're Republicans, they say they're Democrats, they're not. They're all in one giant uniparty. The Washington establishment, the government, and all the three-letter agencies that are involved. All the tools and weapons that the American people fund so that they can protect us from terrorism and threats abroad are now being used against the American people. And these regime change tactics are one of those tools. So it's vital for us to come together and realize that our common enemy is not Donald Trump. They got people to hate the wrong guy. The media is our enemy. The media is the enemy of the republic. I remember Donald Trump first said that, and I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound good. This man was right. He was right. Only until Donald Trump ran did I finally see what he was talking about. The media is the enemy of the people. These people are colluding with government, big tech agencies, social media platforms. It's a revolving door between all of them. And they're all working against the American people. They're by using fear-mongering tactics, and now they're trying to reuse the same playbook with fear-mongering, calling Donald Trump the next coming Hitler, and how everybody on the right is a bunch of fascists. Republicans are the party of fascism. They're doing it again. Do not allow these people to divide and conquer this country, because in the end, the media works for the globalists. The globalists use the government and the media to divide and conquer this country. These people are always the ones that are constantly saying you will own nothing and be happy. That is what they truly believe. And when these people say things, you should believe them. I think Derek Chauvin deserves a retrial on this. And I can almost guarantee you if he does go for retrial, I think Derek Chauvin's going to be assassinated in prison. I think they're trying to Epstein Derek Chauvin right now. I do. It may be a coincidence. It may have been a big screw up and had him in the wrong cell or in the wrong block of a prison. But it just doesn't make sense, folks. It doesn't make sense. This is such a high-profile case. This case, getting a retrial, would be a sledgehammer to the entire narrative, to the entire culture revolution that BLM and Antifa brought forth onto this country. that this country is systemically racist and that white cops are killing black people all across the country at astounding rates. It's just not true. It's just not true. But the media desperately wants it to be true. Why? So that they can keep the American people divided and at each other's throats. But thank God we have podcasts and conservative radio, so many different outlets out there for people to get the truth. And they are getting the truth. It's incredible. I'm watching it all across the country. I watch all these street polls where regular Americans, black, brown, yellow, white, are coming together and saying the same exact thing. That this country is heading in the wrong direction, and they know exactly who is behind the wheel. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is called unity. United we stand, divided we fall. And I'm starting to see quite a bit of unity happening across this country, and it's amazing. So just remember, in the next 12 months, you are going to see a massive propaganda campaign unlike anything you've ever seen. Tucker Carlson has pretty much stated the same thing. You're going to see some of the craziest stuff you've ever seen in your entire life. But always remember that God put us here at these exact moments. This is your destiny. This is our divine intervention. We were put here on this earth for this reason. These are our moments, and these moments will be ours for all of time. So we have to make sure that we unify and do not allow the media to divide us. We can't have that. So that's all I got today. Hopefully Derek Chauvin wins his appeal. Part of his plea deal was that he could not challenge his conviction. But there was one stipulation in that plea deal. He can appeal his conviction if he was given inadequate counsel. There was a Kansas City pathologist that came to Derek Chauvin's attorney and to the judge, essentially saying that George Floyd could have died from a tumor that ruptured and released a fatal dose of adrenaline into the body, which certainly makes sense being how he couldn't breathe, and he was saying he couldn't breathe before he was even handcuffed, and how he was talking when he was down on the ground with Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck. There is just a lot of facts and evidence that I think will hit people a little bit different now that some time has went by. And I think if a reasonable jury were to go through these facts and evidence again, I think they would make a different decision. But the reason why he can challenge his conviction, the reason why he can make an appeal, is because he was not given adequate counsel, because his counsel ignored the Kansas City pathologist that came forth with that evidence and that testimony. His counsel ignored it, and the judge ignored it. And so now Derek Chauvin has filed an appeal by himself without a lawyer, saying that he was given inadequate counsel and that he feels that if the jury would have heard these facts and evidence and the theory from the Kansas City pathologist, that the jury would not have convicted him of murder. And that's a big deal. So he filed that appeal last week on Monday, so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I certainly think that he wasn't given adequate counsel if his counsel ignored this pathologist, this Kansas City pathologist. That's a big deal. When you have a doctor that reads the report, a pathologist that says, yeah, this could have happened, and this could have happened, this pathologist is so certain of his theory, he believed so much in his theory being accurate, that he actually said, I cannot go to my grave with knowing what I know. And look, I certainly think that deems a retrial. I think that's pretty credible testimony and more information that a jury should have heard and didn't, because his lawyer ignored him. So that to me is inadequate counsel. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But like I said, these are the workings of a federal government. We don't see this type of stuff. We've never seen anything like this in our lives. You know, the O.J. Simpson trial was just like this. It was an emotional trial that took so long. People's emotions, it was so involved. The media was so involved and had the people's minds warped. Everybody knows to this day that O.J. did it. But he got away. O.J. Simpson got away with murder. That is also a miscarriage of justice. And I think we're watching the same thing happen here, just reversed. We cannot have innocent people spending the rest of their life in prison, folks. And I'll be damned if 20 years from now it comes out that all this facts and evidence that this case is retried and it turns out that he didn't kill George Floyd and this man just lost decades of his life. We're all going to feel pretty crappy if that happens. And so I think Derek Chauvin deserves a retrial, so we'll see what happens. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I've went on long enough. I hope I really buttoned this up as far as the George Floyd case went. I wanted to make sure I did it again. because I don't think I really hit it home on the last one, so I wanted to retouch down on this topic, especially with Darren Beatty's theory about the color revolution and about how this is being controlled by the globalists, and they're trying to divide and conquer this country. I think it's pretty accurate. And I totally believe in his theory. So I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving break. Time to get back to reality, unfortunately, and I will be at work right along with you tomorrow, unfortunately. And if you guys want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me, StephenTaurielloShow@gmail.com. If you guys want to share any stories with me, or you have a story you want me to look into, you have some facts about a story that we've done in the past, send it over to me, StephenTaurielloShow@gmail.com. I'd be more than happy to read about it. If you just want to shoot the breeze, send me an email too. It doesn't matter. Also, if you could, I'd really appreciate it. You follow me on social media, Facebook, TikTok, X. I'm trying to post a lot of content on there, so you'll start seeing my content circulating around social media platforms. If you could, I'd really appreciate it. Share the content. Also, if you could, follow the show, follow the podcast, share the podcast as much as you can. I don't make video yet. That's coming down the road. I got some things I'm working out, but I will start to make videos here shortly. I just got to get the space to do it. So as of right now, I'm just going to get content out there with audio until we get a space set up for some video action. I think it's going to be pretty incredible, and I think it's going to be a lot more helpful for the content and for the podcast. And we'll see. I think a video gets people more engaged, but a lot of people like listening to podcasts. It's a big inside kind of. It's some inside baseball, but maybe we'll talk about it on another show. So anyways, I'm going to be releasing another show around this time tomorrow. So make sure you tune into that one, share the show, follow the show, and I want you guys to have a good day, have a great week. God bless you, and God bless America. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.